got Peter, and we got Linda, we got everybody. And, I always like to phrase this as staying in your lane, because sometimes what we do is we forget some of our responsibilities as brokers. And it's amazing how many times I've talked to brokers who really don't really read the first few pages of a purchase agreement or listing agreement. They just, kind of go through it, and they don't take the time to go through it with their clients. And that's like a major no-no. So for the senior brokers, this is kind of a old hat. I know they're kind of looking at, I'm sure Barry and Linda have it memorized already. But for the newer breakers, we're going to kind of go through this thing today and chit chat a little about what they actually mean and where the confusion is on your broker responsibilities. So what you will learn, let's see if I got this right. Yeah, I'll go to the share just where you guys can see this. Here's just kind of a quick and dirty one for you guys to understand what those first few pages mean. And what does honesty mean? And how does that work? And what are you disclosing when we actually do that? And it's simple. Forgive some of the spelling, I'm just looking at it. Honesty, full disclosure of any adverse materials. That's become more and more relevant, not only in terms of our new adverse materials disclosure that your seller should be filling out, but that also puts you in the boat. Sometimes you get in a scenario that you're helping your relatives and one thing or another. Oh, I do know about they've got a roof fix, blah, blah, blah. Any kind of material interest with your family, and things that you shouldn't do, we know, is like disclosing price and so forth. So, those are the kind of things that you run into on occasion. And hopefully it's all pretty much written out for you if you just pay attention to it. Because when you really look at the first few pages of, be it a listing or be it a purchase agreement, we're going to go through that. And the first thing it starts off about is the fact that all brokers are required to perform specific duties. And I like this line here because unfortunately, too often I hear about it, and it's not good when I'm hearing about it, that, oh, now we're in trouble. But prior to the time that you put together any kind of document, be it a listing agreement, purchase agreement, whatever, you must disclose your duties to them and what you're responsible for. And you not only owe it to the person you're doing it with, but it states there in Section 8, all brokers in this transaction owe the following broker duties to all buyers and sellers, landlords and tenants. Even if the broker is not representing the buyer or the sellers, you may have one side, but you are also have a responsibility to, in all the transactions that you're part of this, people are coming to you expecting your expertise on doing this transaction. And even though sometimes, and I see it happen, and unfortunately we get into problems, is when people kind of cross those lines and one thing or another, and they're talking maybe to the listing broker's client. Well, even if you get caught up in that scenario, you still have to be respectful to that client. But even more so, you need to be respectful to the other broker. I've got a situation going on right now where I have a broker, and it turns out that the broker is helping her husband's cousin in a transaction. I know the selling broker is a very well-known broker here, a really nice person to work with. And lo and behold, our broker who's representing the cousin, I mean, this guy, he's going off the wall. First thing he did is he started calling the other broker. And even though they had a purchase agreement in place, he was trying to get the other broker to do a renegotiation with it. I want to renegotiate the contract. Well, no, you can't. Well, there's graffiti across the street and we want that fixed. You haven't gone down that process. And I know that it really stressed out my broker because this was happening And of course, the other broker was a QB, and he called me immediately and said, this is what's going on. And I think that our broker, I'm not trying to make up stories about them, but I think our broker probably needed to spend a little time on these first couple pages explaining to her cousin-in-law of her responsibilities. And yes, she does owe responsibility, even though she's not representing the seller or the other QB. She has to be polite in working with them, as well as that QB being polite working with the cousin who's kind of gone off the rail. So starting off with, they've divided it up in the last couple of years, and it's simple. It's number one is honesty and reasonable care. We all know what that means, and to be ethical. We have to stay within compliance of not only the local, state, and federal fair and the New Mexico real estate law, but also the Real Estate Commission rules. I've been getting a lot of emails and people calling me and saying, do we still have to fill out the COVID addendum? The hold harmless one. And I email them back and I said, I have not gotten a word from the Real Estate Commission not to. And this is a perfect example of us having to be in compliance. And just because people are walking around without masks and so forth like that, the state has not declared us as being COVID free. And the state has not said, okay, realtors, you don't have to do those disclosure forms anymore. So that's part of it. And of course, performance of all the written agreements as a prospective buyer, everything should be in writing. This is not HGTV. I love watching these guys there. Those guys are great. Well, let me just go ahead. I'm going to call Loretta and see if she'll take this deal. Or, hey, Linda, do you think you guys are going to come down in price? No, we don't operate like that. That doesn't mean that you can't have levels of communication with your people, but you better also be willing to understand that, guess what? This is not HGTV, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to do everything in writing. That's what that means. All right. There it is. Any written brokerage relationship, okay, needs to be disclosed. Any materials, this is the fun one. Any materials, interest, relationships of a business, personal, or family nature that the broker has in the transactions needs to be disclosed. So a lot of people get into this whole thing and they have a relative and they're saying, well, they call me. This is what always blows me away. They call me and say, Tom, do I need to disclose that I have a relationship with the seller? I said, well, what kind of relationship do you have? Well, he's my brother-in-law. Well, yeah. Or, this person is we're my significant other. We live together, but we have separate names. Do I have to disclose? Well, yeah, simple stuff. The other one here is when you get a transaction coordinator. Any written agreement the broker has with the transaction coordinator who will be providing services related to the transaction coordinator. And I put there in red in this little annotated copy here, transaction coordinator must be licensed under your QB if they're an associate broker. So for example, we have Paula, has her licenses hanging under me as an associate broker. But there is an exception that you can hire a TC who has a QB license and they can work anywhere. And if you did not know, Paula has just passed her QB exam, and Paula can be a QB for anybody in Farmington, anybody in, I think that's kind of the direction. Paula, are you there? I don't want to speak for you.
No, I'm here.
Okay. Tell us your role that you're going to be now as a QB TC.
Right. So that will, as just as the statement says, it will allow me to provide QB services outside of this particular brokerage. And my intent is to stay with Keller Williams brokers. That's what I'm most familiar with using Command and certainly the services that we have to offer. So Everything was submitted to the commission today. Tom signed off, so fingers crossed within the next month, I should have that license hanging here as well. So,
Woohoo. I mean, major applause to you, Paula. Thank you.
thank you.
Because it's such a service that she provides to this office. And for her to be able to provide these other services like up to Farmington or Taos, technically Silver City, Ruidoso, well, for any KW, there's even a KW in Las Cruces that isn't under our market center, but she could technically, because it's all command driven, pick up business there as well. So in a nutshell, rah rah for you, Paula. I love it. I keep teasing her. I said I can just slide all the names under her, but she doesn't want to bite on that one yet. So anyway, keep that in mind that if you are going to use a TC, and that person could be an associated broker like Paula has been for a long time, but that person would have to be under my license. Give you an example too. We know we have a TC that works out of Ruidoso. She's an associated broker, but she can't do Ruidoso's work because that's a different QB. And when she came over, she was under my license. Now, I do know that she has been talking to me that more than likely she is going to move her license under the Ruidoso QB, which makes more sense because she lives there and so forth like that. And it's a little harder to do it otherwise. Okay, let's move on. Written disclosure of any adverse materials about the property or the transaction, including financial abilities, all these other things there that you need to know if an individual comes to you and says, you know what, I want to sell my house as is. That's a famous. Well, what does that really mean, as is? Because you're looking around and you're seeing water stains in the roof and you're seeing, cracks in the floor. What does that mean, as is? And to tell you the truth, those kind of properties, be very careful about, because a lot of times your seller immediately starts telling you, oh yeah, man, the roof is just terrible and we need to get it replaced. We need to do this. Whoa, don't tell me, because once you tell me, I now have actual knowledge. Now you may want to tell me that because we're going to communicate that in an adverse disclosure statement. That property, the old property disclosure, now called adverse. And they really are encouraging, even though we're a non-disclosure state, that's why they came up with adverse materials, is that they encourage all sellers to fill those out. And there for a long time, because we're a non-property disclosure state, a lot of sellers were saying, you know what, I don't want to fill one out because, you know what, I've only leased this place for the last 10 years. I haven't lived in it. I don't know anything about it. Well, where the adverse disclosure statement has come in, it changes that up. Because even if you're the landlord, and in the statement, it may say, have you lived in here? No, I have not. Well, are you aware of any issues? You can't tell me that a landlord would not be aware of the fact that a roof had to be replaced or plumbing had to be done. Because in all reality, they're going to have to come to the landlord and say, hey, you know what? My shower isn't working. Everything's clogged up. Can you fix it? Blah, blah, blah. So it's good. This helps the new adverse material thing. And this 2 pages really gives you, the broker, the power of the overall agreement. We don't use it enough because we don't take the time to go through this 2 pages. All right. So they separated it out to section B. All right.
Tom, could I ask
Yes.
you a question
Sure.
before we get off that adverse material? With the situation and the new form that we have, can a seller just say, can they really get away with saying, I'm not going to do it because I've never lived in the property? So
No,
we're still seeing that. What do we do if we're on the buying side and they say that?
you need to say, at the very least, you mean to tell me that they've never had to have any kind of repairs? I can't accept that. And you put that adverse material in your deadlines, to be received three days after your acceptance. Then once they don't fill it out, then you just document the fact that the seller would not fill it out. but just cover your butt. And I think as we educate them a little bit, Linda, down the road, I think sellers and unfortunately, a lot of brokers are going to understand that this is to protect them. You know, think about it. I mean, you've been selling for a long, long time, and all of a sudden, even when you're in the middle of the transaction, then the seller will say, "Oh, Linda, I've been meaning to tell you, yeah, I forgot to mention to you that we had extensive repairs on the roof." Whoa, tilt, stop. Here's the adverse materials. You just disclosed it to me.
Okay. So the other question too is that some people are saying, well, because they already fixed the roof, there is no more adverse material fact to be told about the roof. So there's that weird interpretation.
It is a good one. And I think the next time that we get Ashley on the phone for that, we should tell her that, you know, people are going, well, let's define the word adverse. Because once it's repaired, one could argue, as they do, well, it's not a problem anymore. I got it taken care of. What they're really trying to do is track a baseline. You know, too often, and you know, I have had brokers who have argued the fact of not having an adverse or even a property disclosure in the old days. And then they tell me later when we're in the middle of a lawsuit, oh yeah, the seller did tell me we had that issue. And I said, well, right then and there, why didn't you disclose? You know, how do we disclose? Well, you can use Form 2100. I'll show you that one in a minute. You can do that. That you now, as a broker, can say, you know what? I have gained knowledge that the roof had a problem. And too often we don't do that because we go, okay, well, we'll just, you know, I don't want to know. And, you know, guys, keep in mind, I say these things to you because I've been a broker for a long time. I've been around, I've done it. Oh my God, please don't tell me that. And we kind of dance around it. And it's unfortunate that we do, because then all of a sudden we land up being the people in front of the real estate commission trying to justify that we did not know about it. I just had a broker walk in here a few minutes ago. Here's a good one. And I appreciate it. And he came in and says, oh my God, Tom, he says, I need to tell you something that may pop up. I said, okay, what's going to pop up? He had the listing, somebody on his team had the purchase agreement. So they double-ended it within his team. And apparently the seller, after 8-9 months living there, called the buyer's broker, somebody on his team, and said, oh, by the way, I'm very upset with Keller Williams and with you. Well, why? Because somebody was murdered on this property, and nobody told me. Wow. The broker told me, he said, I never knew that. I know that my teammate didn't know that. And as we know, in the state of New Mexico, you do not have to disclose a death in a house. You don't have to do that. So the question becomes, going back to Linda, is that an adverse material fact now? I don't know. It's a good one to ask, because in the past, I've always tried to be as transparent as possible. I've had situations where in New Mexico, it is not uncommon. And when you get northern New Mexico, grandma and grandpa want to die at home, right? I mean, I grew up around that my entire life. So now, is that really a disclosure issue? You know, never thought about it as such. I also had a client that I sold their house, and he was very concerned about disclosing the fact that his sister-in-law, who was taking care of the house, got murdered in the house. And I mean, it was all over the papers. It was everywhere. And he was concerned that that was going to potentially cause him problems. After a lot of counsel, a lot of discussion with him, I said, you know, Bob, I think you're better off disclosing it. Because the truth of the matter is, we all know those nosy neighbors across the street, as soon as they come back to look at the house without the broker, because they want to see what it looks like at evening, who do you think's across the street knocking on their window, their car window? That, you know, Gladys of the neighborhood going, oh, I hope they told you that there was a murder here. So, you know, those are things that you have to counsel and discuss with your with your clients if you get yourselves in a situation like that. I have to say though, in Santa Fe is the only city I've ever been in that when you tell them, oh yeah, somebody was died here. Ooh, did they have ghosts? Are there ghosts in the house? Oh, the property value just went up because there's ghosts in the house. That's typical Santa Fe. So yeah, Barry.
It's having a death in a home here is an issue for, for folks in our area here. So you have to be really, really cautious.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the truth. I sit there and, I think of my mom's house up in Los Alamos. I know my grandmother, she lived with us and she passed away there, and ultimately so did my grandfather. But, we never thought about it. And when you get to a lot of the Hispanics around this area, particularly the Native Americans, they bring them home to die. So, it's something that you have to have that discussion with your people about. And sometimes, if this house isn't meant for these people, they're worried that somebody died in it. Well, that's probably not the right house for them anyway. For me, yeah, I've been around it all my life. That's just part of life, right? Is death. But I can see where this particular client was really freaked out. She was like freaking out because well, I would have never bought this house. Well, maybe the ghosts are coming out to see her. Who knows? All right, let's move on. Acknowledgement, okay? Acknowledged by the broker that there are matters that you don't have any understanding about. That's the time that you stay in your lane and you say, you know what? I think we need to really find expert opinions on that. We're not lawyers. And, it is so ironic because I've talked to so many of you, and I'm looking at Linda purposely. It's just, it is so much part of our script anymore that we immediately start talking, well, I'm not an attorney, but, we all do it. And even when we're talking to each other, it's so funny. I have to laugh because I just say, I'm not an attorney, guys, but this is how I interpret it. But you begin to get that in your vocabulary, and it's a good one to have. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an inspector. I'm not a roofer. I'm not a plumber. I'm not a radon expert. I'm not an Apex expert. I'm not a Kitech expert. That is a term that you want to just keep doing them because we're not. And we need to stay in our lane, and we need to be able to tell these people, we need to have experts to do this. I'm in a $300,000 lawsuit with one of our clients. Hopefully we're going to beat this. And the client who bought the house, it was a double-ended deal. And the client who bought the house hired the inspector, and the inspector apparently missed that there was Kitech in the house. Now the client or the buyer is now trying to sue not only the broker, but me and Keller Williams, saying we should know this information that there was Kitech. No, we don't. I'm not a plumber, nor was the broker. But the inspector might have some liability because that's why you hire the inspector to say, hey, these little funny colored pipes mean that that's Kitech. So this one shall turn out, we'll let you know in about maybe 6 months. Hopefully it'll go away. But in reality, that's the reason that you never, ever assume that you know everything. You can have experts who tell you that kind of stuff. Of course, number 3 is my favorite. Advise to counsel with an attorney. Sometimes they get out of our hands. I know that I get calls a lot. And Tom, what do you think? And it's the guy that's bigger than me. And there are times that I'll have to turn to you and say, I'd love to give you the answer to that, but I can't. And it sounds that your client needs to hire an attorney now. And they just hate that. Brokers hate it. I hate it because we know that we're all of a servient nature. That's who we are as individuals. And we don't like to have to tell our clients, well, you know what? It looks like you're going to have to spend some money now, even though you've hired me. But this is something that is bigger than me. and I can't give you legal counsel on that. And there are times that you get into the ones that really bite are after the case. I just got an email this morning from a client from one of my brokers. They went through the ORW. They had requested that there be a new replacement or repair of the HVAC system. And that this is the HVAC system guy we want to use because he'll take care of it. They got a counter to the ORW saying, no, we want to use our own HVAC system guy to redo the repairs as needed, and we will get a warranty from this HVAC person. And they signed off. Well, lo and behold, the person's now, it's getting a little hot, decided, well, I think I need to turn my air conditioner unit on. And lo and behold, they called their guy to come turn on the air conditioning. And the work that HVAC person did was very shoddy, apparently. And we don't know exactly if the warranty is going to hold up or not. So my broker says, what can I tell my client to do? Well, I said, first of all, let's start off with the plumber who said he was going to fix the HVAC system. Let's see if his honor is there with his warranty. That's a starting point. And then if not, then it looks like your buyer, your client may have to get legal advice. Those are things after the fact. And 9 times out of 10, if it comes after the fact of you guys are done with the contract, that's the road you're heading down. And it's never fun. I certainly filled a lot of them because you're communicating to your E&O and you're saying, this is blowing up in my face. I personally you may personally as a broker may have to hire an attorney to cover your butt and more than likely get me involved as your QB. And then we may have to be going to our E&O company or a personal liability company and may have to be hiring an attorney to represent a KW. So it's just very important that if you don't know something, don't make the assumption that you, regardless how many years. I mean, again, I'm looking at Barry and I'm looking at Linda, myself. We've been in this business a long time, but we're not experts on everything. And sometimes it comes back to bite us. We've all been down that road and it's not fun. And, if you can make a career out of this industry without a lawsuit, you're doing pretty doggone good. Right? Yes, sir.
The longer I'm in the industry, the less I know and am willing to share with somebody else. I am an accountant by, Anderson School of Management, UNM. And I tell people, yeah, I'm an accountant. And my advice is go find an accountant, It's just, it's not what I do now.
Yeah. Well, I know Linda too, you've grown up around the contracting business. So you have a lot of knowledge. I mean.
Yeah, and I'm really, really careful about that one because, there was one situation where it said, oh, you as the seller's broker, shouldn't you have known that the windows were installed incorrectly with your experience in construction? Like the house was built in 1988. How would I have known how the windows were installed, number one? So I'm really, really careful to qualify that I've never had a QB license, that, I've worked for a construction company and that, I can point them in the right direction and find them a source to give them that expert advice. So I really play that very, very carefully as you do, Barry, because, we can't be said that used to be your life. So you're much more of an expert in that.
Well, I'll tell you one that's very fearful for me is that just having the credentials of QB is the assumption that people think, well, Tom has all the answers. He's a QB. He knows what to do. No, I may have the credentials of QB, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a plumber. And you hear me go on and on and on of all the things that I'm not. You know, I'm just a guy who knows the contracts and read them and study them. There's not one person that is here today on this tutorial or this class that cannot have the same level of understanding of these contracts as I do. What it comes down to is reading them and stopping after each statement and saying, what does that sentence really mean? What does it really mean? Okay, let's keep going. Prompt accounting, speaking of Barry, prompt accounting for all money or property received by the broker. This is that earnest money that you get. More than the only time any money even touches your hand even a little bit, you might get a check. And you go, oh, what do I do with this check? In the old days, we used to have that check and we'd run across the street to the title company and says, here's the check. Please give me a receipt for the check. But COVID paid off for us in a little bit because more and more people are saying, why don't you get a wire transfer that you directly send that money via wire transfer to the title company? Or even more so, if you don't want to do this, here's the address to the title company. Please go and hand deliver it to this title person. And you're not touching it. But at the very least, that title company should be sending you a receipt that they've received the money for your earnest money. And then you send it to the appropriate parties. You send it to the, to everybody and say, yep, earnest money's in. Okay. Be careful. We get caught up on these other ones called occupancy agreements. And there's money being exchanged. Truthfully, that occupancy agreement has no place for your signature or even mention of you, except that you provided the form and may have filled it out for them. But in that occupancy agreement, it talks about how the money is going to flow. Where's it going to go? Who's going to pick it up? Who's going to deliver it? Sometimes it's at the title house. Sometimes they say the broker. God, stay away from that if you can. My classic I always tell people about, and I share it because it could happen to you. In the olden days when we used to take an earnest money check, I was always very deliberate about putting the check in my little envelope in my paper file. And it so happened that this buyer of mine decided that they were going to make the offer. And I said, okay, I need an earnest money check. And they did. It was a Saturday afternoon. So I put it in my envelope and stapled it to my folder and so forth. And next thing I know is Monday morning rolled around. I said, I got to get rid of that earnest money check. I got to take it. And I got the folder and I opened up the envelope and there was no check. Where could that check be? Man, I tore everything upside down, looked under the desk, looked under the thing, because it was my ass. It was their check. Finally, I had to capitulate and call the client and say, I misplaced your check. I don't know what I did. I was lucky enough. They were nice enough to say, no problem, Tom. We'll put a stop payment on that check and we'll give you another one. And they gave me another one and I hurried it on over to the title house. It wasn't until about maybe 6 months later on my desk where I had all my folders and so forth, I started cleaning them out and so forth. And I was going to reuse the envelopes that I'd always stapled. And guess what? I found the check. I had put it in the wrong folder. But again, those are the things that you don't want to touch money. Make sure, but you have to be accountable for that funds as it goes. Okay. Let's move on down here. This is a fun one. Number 6, written disclosure of broker relationships available in New Mexico, exclusive agency, dual agency. And you can see here that I actually highlighted exclude represent as agent. Keller Williams, we do not operate as agency. Okay. We are transaction brokers. So the non-fiduciary responsibility is what we follow. for all of us who have been in this business a long time, and fortunately you guys as new brokers don't hear about it as much, we started off being agents. You're the seller agent or the buyer's agent. Okay, and we created agency. My fiduciary responsibility was only to the buyer side or the seller side, whichever side I was representing. We moved away from that because what agency really creates is a fiduciary common legal responsibility to one another. In other words, you speak for them. Okay? However, you should be aware of, they also speak for you. When you create agency, you're going both ways. Classic one I did, there's only one guy in town that I'm aware of who still does agency. And I was in a negotiation with him at Quail Run. And it so happened that he and I landed up at the watering hole of Quail Run, having a cocktail in the end of the afternoon. And I asked this guy, well, I know he's Tom, I'm going to be getting this great listing, blah, 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 on da, da, da. And I said, do you know what you're going to list it for? He said, well, we're kicking it around this and that, but I know for a fact that they're going to take XYZ dollar. I said, well, do you already have the listing? Yeah, I have the listing. He said, I just haven't put it up on MLS. I didn't think much about it. 3 or 4 days went by and I got a buyer. Well, I got a house and I know exactly how much he'll sell it for. So I put together the offer, shot it to this broker who was agency, the amount he told me. He came back and said, oh, we can't accept it, Tom. I said, what do you mean you can't accept it? You told me that this is what the seller wanted. No, I know, we were just talking. I said, well, excuse me, are you transaction broker or agency? And his face went white. Why? He disclosed. And he was speaking on behalf of the seller. Being a nice guy, we went back and looked at the counter and came back with our own counter. My point was I was trying to explain to him, because he's very arrogant about the fact of being agency, that I had you. I had you because you were speaking on behalf of your client the moment you had that listing and you signed it as agency. So that's a good reason not to be there. But the same thing happens.
Tom?
Yeah.
Just recently finished a transaction and it was a Redfin who represented the buyer and they work as agents with a written agency agreement. So just be heads up.
Wow, that's interesting because I don't see it very often anymore. So, but that's one to share with me when you get.
No, we don't. And in one of the circumstances, in one conversation, there was a question as to whether the seller was accepting a certain condition or not condition. And he said, well, as their agent, I'm saying she's accepting it.
There you go.
And that was verbal,
Wow.
Of course. So, but that's where it gets tricky. Everything's supposed to be in writing, but he as the agent says she's accepting it. So how do you deal with that?
Right. Well, at that point, he is speaking on her behalf. He is speaking on her behalf. And so, and it goes the other way.
So she could not have come back and changed her mind.
That's correct. That's right.
Okay.
I mean, at that point, he's disclosing just as she would disclose. He's talking for her. If let's use it as that dollar amount again. And they talk a little to each other. We all get up in that. I'll take 540 versus 575. And once that agent spoke to you or to me, they'll take 540. That's just like talking to the seller. Thank you. Great. Here's the contract, 540. You told me. Well, no, that's not what she wants. Wait a minute. You're agent. You speak for her. So try to stay away from that. That's why we don't do that. We're now transaction brokers. All right.
Question, please. May I please ask
Yeah,
a question?
Robert. Mhm.
Okay, so this, with your clients, did you tell them that, this broker was an agent of the seller? And that's why they should offer what they offer because you already knew the price? Did you tell your clients that?
Yes.
Okay, so then what did you do when they came back with a counter offer?
We talked about it and basically all agreed.
What did you tell your
that-
clients, I meant?
Yeah,
'Cause
I'm talking to my client and we all agree that this agent that was representing the seller was a jackass. And that they didn't want to harm the other person, so the counter was within their ability to do it. But they could have said, okay, we're gonna stick to the guns, but they were nice people.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's go back down here to 7. Unless otherwise authorized in writing, a broker who is directly providing real estate service to a seller shall not disclose. Here you go. We were just talking about this, that the seller has previously indicated he or she will accept a sale price less than asking. So even as a transaction broker, if your broker says, well, we'll take 540, you don't go off and say that. You don't have that communication with the other party. Keep your mouth zipped. Same thing with financing terms. We'll consider carrying some paper on it. Okay. Everything goes in writing. You certainly can say to the person, well, would they consider writing paper? Well, I can check with them. But if you really want to make that offer, why don't you write it down in a counter or whatever you want? And also, you never disclose the seller's motivation. This is the classic one. I hear it all the time. Oh my goodness, my people, they really want to live closer to their family. So, or they're sick or they're getting a divorce. All of the things that we hear as not only their broker, but we slowly become their friends, right? It happens. So sometimes you've got to take that step one up. You would never talk about your friend that they're sick or their friend are having financial trouble or your friend, was getting divorced. That's exactly how you need to treat your clients, whoever you're representing. You don't go shooting your mouth off. You may know, but I've heard it more than in this office of people walking around saying, well, I hear they're getting divorced, so it's, keep it zipped. All right, the same thing flies on the other side. Unless you're writing, authorized in writing, the broker who is representing the buyer, same thing, that the buyer is willing to pay a greater price. Okay, that this is the motivation. Any of those things there. So regardless which side you're on, you certainly, unless you have it in writing that says, yes, you may tell them that I am getting divorced. Okay. You don't say a thing. Okay. All right. Where are we? Here's a fun one. So again, it goes down to just reading this. And I know I sound like a broken record, guys. And all of us, just email me that you want this annotated copy and just reread it. I'll be frank with you. Since I've been sitting in this chair, I've read more contracts again than I have for years. Because as you get more and more seasoned in this experience of being a broker, the sloppier we get because we know what it says. We think it does. And then when it changes, everybody's in a, oh my God, when did this change? Oh, it changed, 3 years ago. And that just goes to show you how far back you haven't read it. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. Conflict of interest, material relationships, adverse materials, we talked about it. And we also talked about the TC. But here's one that I think a lot of people don't really always look at is the level of the work your TC work is going to be. Okay. So you can see, let me reduce this a little bit. You can see broker has a written agreement with a transaction coordinator, okay? Who will be providing services as for the broker duties, TCs who have no interaction with a broker's customer or client and or other parties or broker involved in trades owe broker duties 1 through 5 in section 8. Okay. So if I hire Paula and she's not going to be interacting at all with the client, she is still responsible for the first 5. Okay. The honesty, the compliance, the performance, and written documentation and adverse. Okay. However, if I hire Paula and I say, you know what, Paula, I really, really need you also to communicate to the clients, then let's see, we got a little stuck here. There it is. Then she also has the duties 5, 7, and 8 of section B. Okay. So know what roles and responsibilities your TC has. Paula, do you want to jump in on any of that? Maybe Paula left. Okay. So in a nutshell, I like to always show that to you guys a little bit. I'm going to go back to one other little thing here. Hang on. There it is. And let me, got ahead of myself. Sorry about that. So you're in the middle of a contract, and lo and behold, you decided, oh, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hire a broker, or I am going to hire, excuse me, a TC. Well, this is how you disclose. This is form 2100, disclosing broker. And you can use this for a myriad of things. You can use it for your TC. You can do it in conflict of interest. People always ask me, well, is there a different one? Can I use an amendment? Yeah, you can. But 2100 really helps. And I kind of had a little fun with this one. So here it is, supplemental broker's duty disclosure, year 2021. And it starts off here. There I am, Tom Trujillo. I'm with Keller Williams. Here's the address. Here's my email. Broker is conflict of interest. I just had a little fun regarding interest of a relationship. Explain any conflicts the interest of broker has with the transaction. So I said, yeah, property is being sold as joint tenancy to previous wife and daughter by the broker. So indeed, I did have a relationship with my ex-wife and my daughter. They're going to buy this property together. So I disclosed it. Then the other part about it, other written agreements that I may have, well, it turns out that me as the father to my daughter, I'm going to contribute some funds to her for a down payment. So I disclosed it. Turns out that the property that I'm going to sell them was a neighbor of mine. And it said here, the broker's aware the roof had been replaced by the homeowner, but he's also a licensed roofer. So I disclosed it. And lastly, I am going to go ahead and now hire a transaction coordinator. And I put broker has engaged transaction coordinator, Paula Travis. And I put QB license and her number. That's not a real number, by the way, but that's just hers. It's always good to disclose that kind of stuff. So, you know, that's one that's Form 2100. There's one up here as well, 2100A. If you're going to do a transaction coordinator by itself. Yes.
One question on that item number 1, a material interest or relationship of a business, etc. If you have done prior transactions, so say you're working with the seller now and they were your buyer in the past, is that considered a business relationship that should be disclosed?
No.
Okay.
No, I think that's the one area, because that's a client. And I think, you know, God almighty, just saying that out loud, thinking about you and how many people you've done business relationships, every one of your contracts would have to have this.
Yeah, I'm asking because I did get a contract from, and the broker disclosed that they had previously helped that buyer on another transaction. So I thought, "Oh, am I supposed to be doing that on every one of them?"
I think it's understood client is one thing different than a personal relationship and a business relationship, more in the sense that, you and I, for example, let's say you and I did a deal together. Well, we have a lot of common ground, do we not? We have a business relationship, not only broker to QB and broker to broker, but you and I also are business owners together. We each have a business relationship, being shareholders to this market center. So there would be one. But, I think if you were just doing another transaction for one of your previous clients, I don't think you'd have to worry about it, Linda. Okay. Okay. So what'd you guys take away from it? Did I scare you any? Yeah, Barry?
The reason I picked this one to spend some time with is the longer we do this, the more comfortable we think we are with what's in there, and don't do that, man. You make sure you go over that again and again and pay attention to that, or pretty soon it's like, yeah, I knew that at one time and I forgot it. And now it really bit, So it's a
Yeah.
refresher and it's a great one.
Well, thanks, Barry. And I know it's in, I'm looking at both you and Linda, both senior brokers getting on it. I appreciate it because you also can pass on information to the new brokers of how important it is. And I'm the first to admit it. I'm no different than you guys. You just get so used to doing a listing and purchase agreement, you just fly over that first 2 pages. And really that first 2 pages gives us a lot of strength if we just take the time and explain, hey, guys, one thing you should know about me. Yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to get this house sold, but there are going to be times that I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, that's why. And even more so when you have that buyer's agreement and you're first timers and you're going, well, you explain that to them. That's also that time that you can say, this is going to be the process. So once we get this thing under contract, I'm going to immediately hook you up to know who your title people are. And we're going to go out, we're going to do those inspections. And, I'm going to give you some names that you can call for the inspector. And they go, oh, won't you call for me? Well, it's really not good that I do, because that agreement's going to be between you and them and not me. And, I'll be there to open up the door and so forth. And, you can be there as well as a buyer to look at it, but you'll also see me kind of step back. I can sit there and I might be even with my computer. I don't make any comments because I'm not an inspector. I don't know anything about it. And they go, oh yeah, right, Linda, you've been building houses and around it forever. Well, that's exactly the point, is that's why you use that first few pages as a tool to explain to your clients that, hey, there's only so much I can do. Okay. All right, guys. I think we beat this one up pretty good today. Love you all that you're here. We'll have it on recording as well. So, pass it on to the other brokers, tune in, hear what we have to say. Oh, there's Rose Lopez Brown. Hi, Rose. She waved and she turned us off. Okay, guys, we'll see you at the 3 o'clock. Everybody have a good one.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, Rose, bye-bye.
Bye.